Hey, Lloyd Lofton here. Um, Today, I didn't realize this. Today is National Good Neighbors Day. And when I saw that come up on the calendar and I knew that I was going to do a video today, I thought it took me back to a memory. Because, who doesn't want to be a good neighbor? I mean, we've lived in the same neighborhood here for about 12 years. I know all the neighbors on our cul-de-sac. We're here to support each other. We do things together. So who doesn't want to be a good neighbor? But when I saw that it was National Good Neighbors Day, did you even hear about National Good Neighbors Day? Did you know that existed? I thought back to a time when it became painfully apparent to me I wasn't a good neighbor. Now, most of my kids were born and raised in Yorba Linda, California. We lived out there, most of my early adult life, and we raised our kids in church. In fact, I was on the board of the Crystal Cathedral. Here's my Bible, and I still have my Bible that was autographed by Robert Schuller. We used to go to his house every year. He had all the board members come over and come to his house. So I've always participated in the community and worked to be a good neighbor, or what I think was a good neighbor. And when we moved from Yorba Linda, California to Knoxville, Tennessee, my stepfather had had a coronary heart disease. He was dying from it. In fact, he died a year and a half after we moved there. But we moved there to help my mother, and so we had to start a new church. We started the new church. Now I grew up in Chattanooga, Tennessee, so I knew a lot of the Southern slang, but I had been away from the South since I was 12 years old. So we were like, I guess I was in my early 40s when we moved to Knoxville, something like that, maybe, probably 40, 42 years old. And we were sitting in church, and I liked the church. I didn't love it. It wasn't like the church that we had in California, but we'd been in the one in California for years and years. Our kids were raised in the church, and I used to help Joe Spot, who was like 92 years old at the time. I used to go pick her up on Sundays and bring her to church, and then she would come to our house for Sunday dinner. So we were used to all that kind of stuff. I was head of the Helping Hands Committee. I'm not trying to sell you on church. I'm just describing this to you. So we liked the church, but we weren't in love with it yet because we weren't that involved in the church. I was involved with some of the committees on there. I've always been someone that would be involved in committees. And so I knew a number of the people at the church. And one Sunday, they did something that was kind of unusual. I hadn't seen that in a while. We didn't see that a lot in California. But I thought it was nice until it hit me what it meant. Now, I ran an agency office in the insurance business in Knoxville, Tennessee at the time. We were probably 15th in the country, did pretty good. I thought we did pretty good. And I thought I was pretty good at my job. And I thought that I had a pretty good reputation out in the marketplace. My team did well. We worked with lawyers and we worked with CPAs, and we did a lot of things in the community. And I remember this one day that after the sermon, but before the end of church, the pastor did what I consider to be kind of like a mini eulogy for this husband that had passed away too early. Wasn't much older than me at the time. I think he was like less than 50. And he had the wife and kids stand up. And as he talked about this family who they grew up in the church when they were kids, and they were having their kids grow up in the church, when he was talking about it, I thought it really, really heartfelt. And I knew these people. Like, I didn't know them, but I had been to church functions with them, and bake-offs and stuff like that, the normal stuff that you do. So I knew them, kind of casually. One of the things that I was careful about, and I was professional in my job, and I didn't go seek out people in the congregation to try and push insurance on them, life insurance or health insurance or those things on them. You don't want to feel like that you're taking advantage of the place that you're worshiping at, or other organizations that I might have belonged to. If people want to ask you about it, of course you're going to be helpful, and I was. Um, and I had some of my clients were members of the congregation, but you don't want to be pushy about doing that. You don't want to be viewed as a salesperson, as salesy. You don't want people like shying away from you when you walk up to them because they think you're going to try and do business with them. And as I'm sitting there, and I always felt good about my role in the church and how I kept that uh, wall between my business and my relationships with people at church. I was always proud of that. And I thought that was the right thing to do. And I felt like in doing that, I was being a good neighbor. Like if you called me to bring my truck over and help take something to dump for you, I would have done it. If you called me to come over and help, uh, paint or move or stuff like that, I would do that kind of stuff. But I didn't try and push my work stuff on you. So this day in church, when the pastor had this lady and her 3 kids stand up, and he was giving this heartfelt talk about this guy and how selfless this guy was, and how even during his normal work day, he would take time off and come by the church and do things for the church when they needed it. And I just, for a little bit of me, thought this is kind of, it's nice to say this. It's nice he's recognizing the family. The congregation is recognizing the loss for this family. It was a huge loss, as it would be, as you would expect. And then he went into this thing about they didn't have insurance and couldn't afford a funeral. And the guy had problems at work and had been laid off for a while and got a job and then laid off. And they had some money problems. And as the pastor's kind of going through this heartfelt story, you can see the kids kind of shuffling their feet and the little boy turning his head into the mom's hip. And you see the wife, the mom, kind of looking around the church, but not really making eye contact with anybody. And the ushers are coming down the aisles and they've got the baskets. And what the pastor was doing is he was asking for a donation to help pay for the funeral expenses. And as the basket's going up and down the aisles, and we're sitting maybe 6 rows from the very back of the church, 6 rows back, the church was always full. We sat back there because one of my kids was still young, and if they had a problem or something, we were close to the door. But as the basket's going around, and I'm getting in my pocket, and I'm taking out, and I think I undid like a $20 bill or something. I was going to be, what I consider to be generous. I'm sitting there thinking, I know these people. I've seen them at church events. We went one holiday to their house for a dinner. What do you call it? A smorgasbord dinner where you bring your own plate, where everybody brought a plate. We went there for that. I remember being in the backyard with the kids and talking to them. I knew these people. And it's the basket, and they started at the very front of the church and then came backwards. And as the basket went down the row, then came to the next row and went down, then came up, got closer and closer to us, I kept thinking, you really haven't been a great church member to these people. Here this lady is standing there. It had to be embarrassing, if not humiliating, to basically have the pastor of your church begging for money and telling the story of how your husband and yourself couldn't make enough money to support your family, that in the most emotionally devastating time of your life, you're having to ask, basically strangers for money to get by. That your kids who go to school with other kids in the congregation, have got to be mortified. Not only that the family doesn't have money, maybe that's the first time they even heard that they didn't have money. Maybe they didn't know that. But that this guy who's the pastor that, people reverend, and, there's a certain way around the pastor. You know how that is. Like when you're driving to church, it's you better shut up, knock it off. I'm going to knock the fire out of you. And then you get to church and get out of the car. Hello, pastor. Good to see you. The kids have seen that. And now they're in front of the church basically begging for. And the kids that are in the church, they're going to see them, their peers, they're going to see them in school. And Little League, if they can afford it, I'm thinking, I'm in the business where I tell this kind of story to people all the time. Kind of like the mafia, people equate insurance agents to the mafia, right? Hey, it's a nice family you got there. It's a shame if something were to happen to you, that kind of thing. I'm sitting there thinking, as much as you think you're a good neighbor, as much as you think that you're a good parishioner, and as much as you pretend that you actually care about people, and the basket is like 4 aisles from me coming up. And as it's getting closer, I'm having more trouble breathing. My palms are sweating. And I'm just feeling like the biggest freaking loser in the world. Because I had this false sense, this ego, this pride that I wasn't going to be that pushy salesman. And in not being that pushy salesman, in not setting up a situation where I felt like people thought I was taking advantage of my relationship at the church. In other words, it was all about me. It was all about protecting me. In doing that, I never cared enough about this lady and her kids and other members of the congregation. I never even cared about them enough. I didn't care enough about her husband to go knock on their door and say, when you pass away, what do you want your wife to do about the burial besides standing in front of church with your kids asking people for money? Is that what your plan is? I didn't have the courage to go to the wife and say, here's what I wouldn't want my wife to have to do. I wouldn't want my wife to have to stand up with our kids, 4 kids still at home, in front of the church and say, I love my husband. He did the best he could do, but the poor guy couldn't make enough money to support us. And now that he's gone and didn't put anything in place to protect the family, not only do we don't have enough money to bury him with some kind of dignity, I'm going to have to sell the house, move to a different town because I've got to get a cheaper house so that I can afford to take care of my kids. I'm going to have to take on a part-time job. I didn't have the courage to go talk to them about that kind of stuff. That might have prevented this. I assumed that they wouldn't have had the money to pay for life insurance, nor would they have wanted me to talk to them about it. I assumed them in a position to make myself feel better or to prevent myself from feeling bad about being some pushy salesman. And who knows, maybe if I had done my job, maybe they could have had a $100,000 decreasing term policy or, $150,000 20-year term policy for $30 a month they could have afforded. And the wife wouldn't have to be standing there with her little boy up against her side, up against her leg, trying to cover his face out of embarrassment. Maybe that could have happened. Maybe I really wasn't a good neighbor. Maybe I was an effective neighbor. Maybe I was good at making people think I was a good guy. And maybe I was good at projecting an image of being helpful and you can always call Lloyd. Clearly you could, because here I am in church with hundreds of other people. And right about now is when the basket comes to me and I put the $20 in there and I felt so inadequate as a man and as a professional in my field. And I passed that basket down to my wife and she put $20 in the basket. And I thought, the best as a Christian, the best as a highly trained licensed professional, the best as a prideful man that I could do for this family is in the worst emotional time, drop $40 in a basket for them. And I was ashamed of myself. And when we left that day, I told my wife what my thoughts were about it and how upset I was about it. But I made a commitment to myself that I was going to start being that pushy salesman. I was going to start being that guy, not like in a negative way, not like an in your face kind of thing, but I was going to quit being afraid of having those tough conversations. I was going to be that doctor you go to that says, hey, let me do a test on your skin there. You got a couple of moles there, and I don't like the looks of them. We're going to do something about that. I'm going to be that doctor. I'm going to be that doctor that says, me renewing your blood pressure medicine is not going to help you if you're not going to lose weight. So if you're not going to lose weight and you get your arteries clogged and you have a heart attack and die, what do you want me to tell your wife from the last bill I have to send? I want that kind of doctor taking care of me, right? I don't want to get on an airplane and have a pilot come on the plane inebriated, still inebriated from the night before. I don't want to be sitting on the plane all strapped in, my wife's strapped in, our kids are strapped in, the stewardess is up there and they've given the talk about putting the mask on and all that kind of stuff. And the pilot comes on and says, I'm a little buzzed from last night, but I had a really good time. And don't you worry about it. We're going to do the best we can today. We hope nothing's going to happen, but you just got to smell the roses in life. If you had a pilot like that, you'd unbuckle and get the heck off the plane, right? I'm not going to be that kind of guy anymore. I'm not going to be that supposed professional where I'm afraid to have tough conversations with people because they might think bad of me. That woman, that mother, that widow probably thought my wife and I would be good people because we put $40 in a basket. But I would rather her think I'm a little pushy and stand up there and be grateful that she got a check from an insurance company that's going to protect her kids from losing their peer relationships, losing their church family, having to move into a new neighborhood, and the embarrassment and humiliation of standing in front of a congregation while a pastor begs for money to bury your dad. I just didn't feel like that made me a good neighbor. And I haven't thought of that story in a long time. But when I saw that today was National Good Neighbors Day, it made me think of that story. So in your business, what are you doing that doesn't make you a good neighbor? Either a business good neighbor or just, in your neighborhood. What are you doing that doesn't really make you a good neighbor? What could you be doing in your profession to be a better neighbor to other business owners so that in that kind of position, whether it's helping them increase something, decrease something, start something, stop something, eliminate something, block something, gain something, what can you do as a professional in your business to be a better business neighbor so that the very people you might be connected to out there, whether it's LinkedIn or Facebook, you do, to never put you or your business or your family in a bad situation because of some loss that they've had or some impact from the economy, I'm going to come talk to you. You're welcome to tell me no. I've been married 36 years. I know what no means. I know how to go lay by my dish. But don't expect me to be your good neighbor anymore. I'm going to be your effective neighbor from now on. So listen, if you're on YouTube, click below to subscribe so you get notified every time I do a video. Hit that little alarm so you get notified. Put a comment down here on LinkedIn and just kind of let me know what your thoughts are about being a neighbor. How does that story impact like the business you do? What could you be doing better with people you're connected to? What could you be doing better as a good business neighbor, that you don't go out to people because you're afraid of being pushed back? What are your concerns and fears about it? Listen, there's no ridicule to it. There's nothing to feel embarrassed about it. I recognize that that's the problem that I had, and I got over that problem. And so I just want to challenge you to do the exact same thing. Hey, we're gonna talk about in the next video I do. We're gonna talk about. Well, I'll make it a secret for you. I'll be a surprise for you. Hey, thanks a lot, guys. I'll talk to you next time.